Hello, welcome back to the channel. So this week, or this past week I should say, has not been all that productive. And yes, I did dig up those irises and divide them on Monday. But other than that, there was just some general maintenance again going on. And well, I did get the additional posts that I wanted to for the rose garden fence, and I put them in. But unfortunately, I didn't run any of the fencing, so there will be no exciting fence running today or footage thereof. And the next few weeks are again going to continue with the August heat and continue to be hot. Although I'm hoping that maybe in the near future there is a slight cool off to the upper 80s or maybe mid 80s. And I will get the fencing run. I definitely need to. The deer have been pressuring the vegetable garden, as you know. I've mentioned it several times before, and the roses are doing very well right now, which only means the deer will be getting at them sooner than later. In fact, last night we had a little bit of rain. We had a bit of rain for a short period of time, probably about a half hour or so. About 1/4 of an inch fell, which is nice. And I'm sure that washed off a lot of the deer spray from the bushes, so I have to go reapply that today at some point to try to keep the deer off of the rose bushes and maybe keep them out of the veg garden. But I still got to build that gate that I've been talking about building for, what, months now, I feel like. Soon, very soon, I'm getting to that point where I'm getting certain things organized and sorted out that I can dedicate a day just to slicing up a bunch of pallet wood, assembling the gates, and painting them. It's not all that hard. It's just, I got to get all my ducks in a row, as it were, and get to doing that. So not a lot of progress so far as the rose garden is concerned, or anything else so far as gardening in general. But one of the important things that I was thinking about with anybody's garden is water. And last year we had an incredibly dry season. The summer was incredibly dry, I think, for most of the country, most of the northern hemisphere, I should say. And water was a big issue. This year, knock on wood, we've been a whole lot luckier and we've gotten much more rain than last year comparatively. Like I said, last night we got about 1/4 of an inch in a half an hour. It's not the good 2-inch soak that I would prefer, but I'll take it. Beggars can't be choosers. Though that means if we don't get rain over the next 3 to 4 days, I am going to have to go around and water a lot of the flower beds again. And it's only because of the extreme heat that we've been getting. Again, 90 to 95 degree days, but with the sun out and the humidity, it's more like 105. And that takes a toll on us, but it also takes a toll on the plants. And certain plants like my dahlias, they don't like it that hot. So a lot of plants are suffering. So today I'm going to be talking about how I water my garden and what I use and why I use it. So let's just get on with that now. So right up here at the front corner of my house, I have what most people probably in the United States and maybe much of the world has, is a simple garden hose. And this hose here covers a portion of the yard. And by that I mean basically up to the front deck, parts of the front deck, which I now have to do some watering, which I'll do after this segment. And some of the shrubbery that's behind the camera there. It does not extend, because it's a short hose, so it doesn't extend out very far. And that then takes me to the other side of the house where my watering system gets a bit more complicated. Now here we are on the back corner of my house, and this is where everything gets a little more complicated. Because, in case you didn't know, I have a fairly large garden. It's about 1.5 acres total. And like I said, that front hose only covers a small portion of the front of the house. So much so it won't even reach to the far side of the porch. But what I have here is obviously water spigot, and I have a 2-way divider with another 2-way split on it. So first, this back hose here, that runs to the deck. Now I have a hose up by the deck, which I'll show you in a second, and that covers the deck area. So any plants I might have up there are all obviously take care of that hose. This hose here in the middle, this one runs out to the veg garden. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And then this hose here covers the side of the house, along the driveway, the front of the house on the other side of the deck where the other hose won't reach, and then out to the flower garden. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And here's the hose for the deck. And right now I have a sort of temporary setup. I'm really not kind of happy about or satisfied with this setup currently. So I will be changing this, but what I won't be changing is the fact that I have a hose here by the deck that can reach across the deck and water all the plants that I have on the deck. So I don't have to share a hose with any other area. This area has its own hose setup. And it's very simple. Like I said, it comes off that, feeds into this lightweight blue hose. And I specifically got a lightweight blue hose so I could pull it across the deck without too much hassle. My wife could do the same thing. And we water all the plants up here on the deck semi-regularly, depending upon the weather. Again, last night we had about 1/4 inch of rain, so I probably won't water the plants up on the deck now until, let's see, Saturday, probably Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. We'll see how the pots dry out. If the pots seem like they're getting drier faster, then I'll give them a soak beforehand. And I've learned from watching others, and again, many of you experts probably know this from experience, I'm learning, but you give the pots, or try to give the pots, a really good soak, and then depending upon the heat and other environmental factors, that good soak could last you a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, again, depending upon things. This back deck tends to get a lot of afternoon, it gets all the afternoon sun. So the pots really cook, and terracotta pots, though I love them, they absorb that heat, and that helps dry out the soil just a little faster. So I monitor the pots, and again, if they need it every day, I give them a good soak every day. If they need it every couple of days, then I give it every couple of days. If I can go longer, like in the fall, I can go maybe 3, 4, 5 days. Again, it depends upon the weather and if we get any rainfall during that time period too. Let's go look at the veg garden. Now here at the entrance to the veg garden, I have a simple post here set up with a hook that I keep the hose stored on when I want to put it away. And this hose here is connected to that other line at the back of the house. I do eventually plan on running something underneath the driveway. That's a wintertime project because it's just too hot right now. But I plan on running something underneath the driveway. And this hose is a 100-foot hose. So the veg garden is 40 by 80. So this 100-foot hose basically allows me to get everywhere in the rose garden that I want to get. Prior to putting this hose in place, I was using the one hose on the side of the house, and that I could get most of the veg garden, but not all of it. So it was hampering me. So again, I put that splitter in, split the hose, brought it over here, set up a new hose, and now I can get wherever I want. The other thing I want to mention too, that I sort of forgot when I was standing over there talking, is on all those splitters, they have on-off valves. So if I need to change out a hose or remove a hose for whatever reason, I can just turn off the one valve and not affect the other hoses in the garden. I want to point out a few more things here with the veg garden hose, and then we'll move on to the front of the house and the flower garden. The hose currently is hooked up to the sprinkler that I have over, the motion sprinkler that I have over in the rose garden. Don't need it right now. Obviously it's daytime, deer aren't coming around. And what I did on the end here was I installed a shutoff valve on this line as well. This does a couple of things. If I need to remove the veg garden hose, it doesn't squirt water everywhere, and it can still keep the line charged going to the motion sprinkler so air doesn't get in the line and there's no sputtering when the sprinkler does its thing. So what I've done to make my life simpler is I've put a lot of quick disconnects on various hose ends. Again, I'll show you more of that when we get over to the flower garden. But here I have a quick disconnect and I have the shutoff valve. So I shut the valve off, pop out the quick disconnect. So I have the hose here, I have the nozzle, quick disconnect, reconnect. If I can make my hands work. There we go. So now the hose is reconnected, life is good, and now I can water the veg garden. I can disconnect it from the motion sprinkler. I don't have to unscrew anything, I don't have to turn the water off. Quick connects, I think, are the way to go when you're moving a lot of hoses around and you need to connect to different components. The disconnect system I use is by Dram, not sponsored. I prefer Dram simply because it's an American company as opposed to a lot of Chinese things that you get off of Amazon. And again, with a 100-foot hose, I can now walk around all of the veg garden here, going in between the various beds I have and stretching all the way out to the end without a problem. I can also do one other thing with this hose, is I can take the hose and I can drag it out into the rose garden, and I could water the bed that is right here, right now. The vegetable garden is only 40 feet wide, hose is 100 foot long, obviously more than enough length to cover what I need. But the rose garden will eventually be 60 feet wide, so this hose will not stretch all that distance. Or if it does, it won't be long enough to get to all the corners of the rose garden in time. So what I will do in the future, probably a year or so down the road, as the rose garden starts to expand, is I will put another fence post here with another hook. Actually, I may do it here. I have to decide where exactly I'm going to do it. Pretty sure it's going on this side. I will put another fence post in with a hook, and I will have a 75-foot hose here that I will then take the 100-foot hose from the veg garden and I will hook it to with the quick disconnects. So now I'm going from the one faucet through the vegetable garden to the rose garden, and then I can water what I need. And the rose garden will not need to be watered every single day once plants are established. That's the other important factor, is an established, and again, you expert gardeners, experienced gardeners, gardeners with all these years way ahead of me, you all know this. Established plants don't need to be watered as often. Young plants, seedlings, that kind of thing, they're going to need more watering. So if we don't have a very wet spring, then I would have to be out here for seedlings that I had, if I had any seedlings, and water them more often. My rose bushes, my privet hedge, some of the other plants that I have here in the rose garden, they can go a week at least without water, sometimes stretching a little more. Although I won't necessarily let them do that, because then that puts undue stress on the plants. And so if I can, so like last year, when we had an incredibly long, hot, dry summer, I would come out here and maybe water the rose garden at least once a week. Just give it a good soak, and then it would be fine for a week. And this way, none of the plants are unduly stressed, and then you don't have to worry about, for instance, if your roses are overstressed, then they might not be as resistant to insects and other damage. And there's a few other plants that are that way too. If they're overly stressed, they're more vulnerable to insects and diseases. This year though, like I said, we've had a very wet year so far compared to last year. So I think I've only watered the plants in the rose garden maybe 3 times this whole summer, which is great because again, a lot more established plants. Now let's talk about the other hose that was connected to this thing, which leads up to the front of the house and the flower garden. So a minute ago, I was talking about putting a post in the rose garden with a hook and a hose, and this is basically what it would look like. Here I am standing in the flower garden. Now this hose currently is hooked up to nothing. But off to the side here, there's a quick disconnect fitting that I can use for the hose that goes down the side of the house in the front. It is just long enough to reach over to this quick disconnect for me to hook it up. Now this hose here is 100 foot, and that covers the entire flower garden, because the flower garden is the entire flower garden is 60 feet wide by approximately 90 feet long. So a 100-foot hose can easily cover the entire garden here once it's all fully established. This is basically the system that I'm running with. It's a series of hoses that are either permanently in place or that are connected via disconnect that I can then use to extend the range of the hose. Now this hose also, because again it's a 100-foot hose, will also lead me over into the rose garden if I wanted to. And I have done that, where I've had this hose connected and I just uncurl it and I run it all the way out there. The system of hoses that I have isn't necessarily the most efficient, but it's a system that works for me. There's one other thing I do want to mention. But what about out there in the orchard? So what I did with that was I purchased a 35-gallon water container that I can strap to the back of my gorilla cart, tow around with my lawnmower, and drag it out there, and simply fill up a 2-gallon water can and give each of the trees basically 2 gallons of water every week or so. Now I haven't been doing that this year, mainly because we've been getting quite a bit of rain, and many of the plants are more established. So the roots are running deeper and they can find their own water that's beneath the ground here. There's some mosquitoes or gnats or something in my face. So a simple watering can then saves me the money of running a tap line all the way out to the orchard that I would only use every now and again. But currently there are 3 plants out there that I do need to water because they're young. There's a Weigelia, a Mr. Poppins, and a, what's the other thing I have out there? Oh yeah, the pomegranate tree that I stole from my neighbor's yard. So what I do is I just simply fill up this 2-gallon water can and I walk out there and give them each a drink. And I do that every maybe, I don't know, 3 to 4 days. Again, depending upon the temperature, and if we get rain, like last night we got a 1/4 inch of rain, I'm not gonna go out there probably until Monday or Tuesday if we don't get more rain. Now by next year, they should be again established enough that the roots are running deep enough and strong enough that I should be able to let them go at least a week without having to water them, but we'll see how things turn out. But Jason, what about the Shade Woodland fern garden you're gonna put back in this space next to the rose garden? Well, because it's in shade, the amount of evaporation that will transpire will be a lot less. So we could get a 2-inch rain and this area will stay wetter longer than, say, the rose garden right next to it because it'll be in, obviously, shade. So this area will not be developed, like I said, for a few years at least, maybe 5 years, 6 years down the road. We'll have to see how things play out. But right now, this area is part shade. Right now I'm staying in this shady spot. And the camera is in the sunny spot. So there you go. It's in the sun. And all along where the rose garden beds will be is all right now sun. But in time, over the next few years, I plan on putting in shrubs, trees, that will create a hedge line, as it were, for the rose garden, which was always the plan because I wanted it enclosed by shrubbery. The trees that grow up will create a lot more shade in this space, which would be perfect for the ferns, heuchera, coral bells, whatever else I plant, foxgloves that I plant back here in this space. And again, because it's going to be in shade, my watering concerns for this space are a lot less. Depending upon the year and when I do this, if it turns out to be very dry like we had last summer, what I could simply do is take those, I could swap around hoses, move the 100-footer from the flower garden over into the rose garden, so it will then stretch into this space, or I could get another hose that again bring into this space, or even just use my 35-gallon container and then hand water the various plants until they get established in the space. So we'll have to see how all that plays out, but long term, once the plants are established in this space, I really shouldn't need to water anything unless I'm just planting something new, because again, the rate of evaporation in the Shady Woodland area should be a lot less, and everything should be very low maintenance in this space, at least in my head. If you have any thoughts on this matter, please leave those comments below. So that is going to kind of wrap up my video for today. I just kind of wanted to touch on how I water my garden. I know everybody waters their garden a little different. For instance, you look at somebody like Laura over at Garden Answer. She has a watering system that literally costs, I'm sure, when you add it all up, cost of having it installed, setting it up, replacing parts, etc., probably in the tens of thousands. We often don't think of something like that. We just see Laura putting in a drip system. We go, oh, how neat and how efficient. And that's great. And honestly, if she didn't have that drip system in place, she wouldn't have the beautiful garden that she has now, because she lives in a high desert. So most of those plants wouldn't survive where they're planted. They would just die. So she needs that drip system in place to keep all those beautiful plants alive so that she has this big, beautiful garden. But again, it costs a lot of money to do that. But if you're just a home gardener, does the benefit outweigh the cost? I think that's what I'm trying to say. Does the benefit outweigh the cost? So if you're somebody who likes to travel a lot and you just have a small backyard garden, maybe a drip system does work for you because it's something you can put on a timer and it's something that you can maintain yourself. If you just don't want to be outside when it's hot or dry to water all your plants by hose. And that's a decision that you have to make for yourself. But again, those systems can add up quite a bit, which is one of the reasons I don't do it here, because I don't want to trench up a lot of my yard. I don't want to put in the piping that's eventually going to get thrown in a dump I thankfully live in Eastern North Carolina. We do tend to get quite a bit of rain, maybe not as much as I'd like on a regular. I would prefer a good inch of rain at least every week. That doesn't happen. Mother Nature does what Mother Nature wants to do. Last night I got a quarter of an inch. Tomorrow there may be another quarter of an inch of rain, and then I may go 7 days without rain before, you know, the next rain. And the next rain could be 3 inches or 4 inches. It may be a little too much rain. It's Mother Nature. She does what she wants to do. But in between of Mother Nature raining, I judge when I need to water my plants, give them a good soaking as needed, and coil up my hose when I'm not using it. So that's going to wrap it up for today. No Sophie today, unfortunately. So for those Sophie fans, I'm sorry, she's out getting her hair cut. So I will be posting up a picture later on in the community section on the YouTube channel. So if you don't, check that out, please go check that out. I will post up a picture of her beautiful haircut. Hopefully I can get her to stay still long enough to get a nice picture of her haircut. And she will be back Monday when the next video comes out. It's hot. I'm staying in the shade and it's still hot. So I'm going to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.